The silence in the house became unbearable after Eunice's death. 49,473 days we lived together. I did the math when I couldn't sleep last night. And for 36 days now, I have woken up alone in our double bed, which now seems immense. Every morning I make 2 cups of coffee as a habit. One I drink myself, the other I pour into the sink, watching the dark liquid disappear down the drain. This is my ritual of goodbye, my way of saying, "Good morning, Eunice. I'm still here." The house on Maple Street where we have lived for the past 30 years feels like a museum of our life together. Every corner holds memories. Here is where Eunice made a greenhouse out of rescued plants that neighbors threw away. In that room, we took in our first rescued cats and dogs before we found them new homes. Animals were our shared passion. Over the years, dozens of abandoned creatures passed through our home, receiving temporary shelter, care, and a new chance here. Eunice always said, "Lloyd, these creatures can't say thank you, but their eyes say more than any words." She was right, as always. I met Eunice in 1970 when I was just starting out as a civil engineer for Cincinnati Construction. She was a secretary in the office next door and fed the stray cats behind the building every day. I fell in love first with her kindness, then everything else. 5 months later we were married, and 3 years later we had Helena, our only child. Helena. Ever since she was a little girl, she was nothing like me or Eunice. Where we saw beauty, she saw gain. Where we found joy in small things, she wanted more. I remember her throwing a tantrum at 16 when we refused to buy her a car, the one the neighbor's daughter had bought for herself. "You're not doing anything for me," she screamed then. Eunice cried all night afterward. After college, Helena quickly married Brandon Bowen, an ambitious young realtor who viewed the world the same way she did, through the lens of numbers and potential profit. They'd built a life for themselves that rarely had room for us, except at Christmas or Thanksgiving, and not every year. The only light in our relationship was our grandson Derek. He inherited Eunice's eyes and her kind heart. Since he was a little boy, he loved coming to our house on weekends, listening to my stories about construction and helping Eunice with the animals. Helena didn't approve of this closeness, but she couldn't completely cut it off. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my musings. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Helena always rings the same way, 3 short, impatient rings. "Daddy, you didn't answer the phone again," my daughter said in lieu of a greeting, walking past me into the hallway. She smelled of expensive perfume and impatience. "Good morning, Helena," I replied as I closed the door. "I was in the garden. It was a lie. I just didn't want to talk to her, just like the previous 5 times she'd called this week. She used to visit Eunice and me once a month, at best. Now, it's every 3 or 4 days. You have all the windows closed again. It's stuffy in here." She threw her designer bag on the couch and went into the kitchen. "I brought groceries." "I have groceries," I objected quietly, following her. "Dad, there was half a bottle of milk and stale bread in your refrigerator. You can't live like that." Helena began laying out bags of food on the table, all pre-cut, pre-packaged, ready to eat. This kind of thing is effortless. It's appropriate for someone who, in her opinion, is incapable of taking care of herself. I sat down at the table and watched her actions. Helena's movements were always precise, economical, nothing superfluous. She looked younger at 51, the result of expensive treatments and a strict diet. Her brown hair, always arranged in a perfect style, was now gathered into a tight bun, emphasizing the sharp features of her face. My daughter was a beautiful woman, but cold, like a statue. "How's Derek doing?" I asked, breaking the silence. Something flashed in Helena's eyes, irritation. "Good. Busy at his new job," she said. "He promised he'd come by this Saturday, said he wanted to show me something on his computer." "I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. Derek needs to focus on his career, not spend his weekends on—" She stopped talking, but I finished for her mentally. On the old man. Derek was the only ray of light in my life after Eunice left. My grandson, so unlike his mother, always made time for old grandpa, as he jokingly called me. A 24-year-old with a lively mind and a kind heart, he was more like Eunice than Helena. "This house is too big for one person," Helena said suddenly, looking around with a critical eye. "4 bedrooms, a living room, a study, a garden. How do you cope with the cleaning?" "Mrs. Patterson comes twice a week," I replied, watching my daughter's reaction. "Are you still paying that woman?" Helena shook her head. "It's a waste of money, Daddy. You could have—" She was interrupted by the ringing of a cell phone. She took it out of her pocket and looked at the screen and said, "I have to take this. It's from work." Helena went out into the living room, but I could still hear bits and pieces of her conversation. "Yes, I'm here. No, I haven't talked to him about it yet. Of course, we can see the house next Tuesday. Yes, the realtor has already given us a preliminary appraisal." My fingers are gripping the coffee cup tighter. So that's it. Realtors, home appraisal. Everything was falling into place. The sudden concern, the frequent visits, the talk about the house being too big for me. Helena returned to the kitchen with a strained smile. "Sorry, work matters. So where were we?" "You said I was paying Mrs. Patterson to clean for nothing," I reminded her, looking at my daughter carefully. "Oh yeah," she waved her hand. "Dad, I'm just thinking about your future. After Mom's death, you need to rethink your expenses. Your pension isn't infinite." "My pension is quite sufficient for my needs," I replied calmly, "and my investments are still generating income." This news clearly surprised Helena. She froze with a bag of orange juice in her hand. "Investments? You never talked about investments." "You never asked," I shrugged. "Your mother and I have always been prudent with money." Helena set the juice on the table and sat down across from me. Her gaze became evaluative, as if she were counting invisible sums in her mind. "And how significant is this investment?" I smiled, sipping my coffee, enough that I didn't have to worry about the future. It was the truth. Eunice and I had never lived large, preferring to save and invest. 45 years as a civil engineer with Cincinnati Construction provided me with not only a decent pension, but also the ability to make investments. Eunice was frugal by nature, which only enhanced our financial discipline. "That's wonderful, Dad," Helena smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. "But money doesn't solve the problem of loneliness and security. At your age, it becomes dangerous to live alone. This is it. The first trial balloon." I expected it, but I still felt a prick of pain at the ease with which she said those words. "At your age." As if my 78 years automatically made me incapacitated. "I'm doing just fine, Helena," I said firmly. "Dr. Myers said last week that I'm in great shape for my age." "However," she insisted, "we need to think about the future, about your comfort and safety." We? Since when did my future become a collective decision?" "I'll think about it," I answered evasively. Helena got up and started to pack. "I have to go to work. I'll stop by tomorrow and bring more groceries." She picked up her bag and headed for the door, but stopped in the living room. "Do you mind if I take some pictures of the house? I want to show my interior designer. Maybe he can suggest ways to make it more safe for you." "An interior designer?" Sure. "Do whatever you want," I replied, watching as she pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of the rooms, the furniture, the windows. When the door closed behind Helena, I slowly walked to the window and watched her get into her shiny black Lexus. She took a few more pictures of the house from outside before she drove off. I returned to the kitchen and sat down at the table, where the second cup of coffee still stood, untouched, for Eunice. "What do you think, dear?" I asked the void. "Our daughter is planning to sell our house. Probably put me somewhere else too." I knew what Eunice would say. She had always been wiser than me about family matters. "Don't judge harshly, Lloyd, But don't be naive either, was what she used to say. In the evening, another doorbell rang. This time it was Derek, who showed up unexpectedly, carrying a box of pizza and a bottle of my favorite whiskey. "Surprise, Grandpa," he smiled as he entered the house. "Decided I couldn't wait until Saturday." Derek was a tall young man with dark blonde hair and green eyes like Eunice's. He inherited her soft chin and open smile that always seemed genuine. "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked, hugging my grandson. "Nope," he winked. "Said I was going on a date. Technically, that's true. I have a date with the best grandfather in Cincinnati and great pepperoni." We settled into the living room, and Derek started talking about his new job as a systems administrator at a technology company. He spoke quickly, enthusiastically, gesturing with his hands, just like Eunice when she talked about her new rescued animal. "And how's your mom?" I asked after a pause. Derek sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. She's her usual self, always at work or discussing some kind of investment with her father. Lately she's been very excited about some new project." He looked at me more closely. "She was here today, wasn't she?" I nodded. "Taking pictures of the house for the interior designer." Derek grimaced. "Grandpa, He hesitated. "I heard him and Dad discussing something about the house and the realtor. But I didn't get the details." I gave my grandson a hard look. "Derek, tell me the truth. Does your mother want me to move?" The young man looked away, and that was answer enough. "She thinks you'd be better off somewhere else," he finally said. "Since your grandmother died, she keeps saying you're not doing well, that the house is too big, too expensive to maintain. And she's already got this other place in mind for me." Derek was silent, and I realized I'd hit the mark. "Grandpa, I'm against it," he said suddenly. "This is your house, yours and Grandma's. I told her it's wrong, but she doesn't listen," I finished for him. "It's in your mother's nature. She always knows what's best for others." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Derek picked up the remote and turned on the TV. "Let's watch that documentary on bridge building you wanted," he suggested, clearly trying to change the subject. I agreed, but my thoughts were far away. Helena's plan was becoming more and more obvious, and I needed to decide how to proceed. As the movie ended, the doorbell rang. We both flinched. "It's Mom," Derek whispered, glancing at his watch. "She said she'd pick me up around 10. "I'll get it," I said, rising from the chair. Helena stood on the doorstep, arms crossed over her chest. Her gaze flicked over my shoulder and fixed on Derek, who was awkwardly rising from the couch. "There you are," she said coldly. "I called you 4 times. Sorry, I turned the sound off." Derek picked up his phone, showing the missed calls. "My grandfather and I were watching a documentary." At 10 o'clock at night, Helena entered the house uninvited. "Derek, you have an early shift tomorrow. And Daddy." She looked at me with a fake concern, a regimen that can't be broken at his age. "I feel fine, Helena," I replied calmly, "and it's always good to see Derek." "Of course, Daddy," she smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "But all in good time. Derek, get ready. I'll take you home." As Derek gathered his things, Helena began to slowly walk around the living room, lingering near the furniture and pictures on the walls. Her gaze was appraising, like a shopper in an antique store. "Had you and your mom ever thought about updating the furnishings?" she asked, touching the frame with Eunice's and my wedding picture with her finger. "This furniture, these things, they're so old-fashioned." "We like these things," I replied. "They have value to us." "Sentimentality," Helena sighed. "You need to look forward, Dad, not cling to the past." "I'm ready, Mom," Derek interrupted our conversation, appearing with his jacket in his hands. He came over and gave me a big hug. "Thanks for tonight, Grandpa. I'll see you on Saturday?" "Sure," I patted him on the back. "Come anytime." "We're having a family dinner with the Thompsons on Saturday," Helena interjected. "Did you forget, Derek?" Her grandson's face stretched. "It's next Saturday, Mom." "No, it's this one." Helena cut him off. "I rescheduled it because the Thompsons have other plans next Saturday. I sent you a text about it." She pulled out her cell phone and started looking for something, then said with fake surprise, "Oh, I guess I forgot to send it. I'm sorry, Dad, but Derek can't make it this Saturday." I could see in my grandson's eyes that it was a lie, but I kept silent. There was no point in starting a conflict. "That's okay," I said. "Come back when you can, Derek." When they left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the headlights of their car disappear down the street. Helena's behavior was getting weirder and more insistent. She was clearly up to something, and that something involved my house. I walked slowly around the first floor, touching familiar objects: the worn armrest of the sofa where Eunice liked to sit, the bookshelf I'd made with my own hands back in our first apartment, the collection of porcelain bells Eunice had collected all her life. Each thing held a story, a part of our lives, and now my own daughter looked at it all as junk to be gotten rid of. As I went upstairs, I stopped at the room Eunice and I called the cat's bedroom, where our rescued pets had lived while we looked for a permanent home. The room was empty now. After Eunice died, I couldn't bring myself to take in new animals. It didn't feel right to do it without her. Back in the living room, I noticed something black on the floor near the couch. Bending over, I picked up a small leather notebook. Helena must have dropped it when she reached for her phone. I opened the first page and saw my daughter's neat handwriting. "House. Preliminary appraisal is $460,000. I turned the page. There was a list of headlines with detailed notes. Realtor, Mark Jenkins, 3% commission. Sun Valley Boarding House, budget option, basic maintenance, $600 a month. Furniture, sell at auction, get contacts." With each page it became clearer. Helena wasn't just thinking about me moving. She'd already planned everything down to the smallest detail, including the sale of my house, my furniture, everything I'd created with Eunice over the years. On the last page was a short note. "Possible moving date is in 2 weeks. Don't delay." I closed the notebook and sat back in my chair, feeling a cold rage rise up inside me. 2 weeks. I only had 2 weeks to confront my own daughter's plan, a plan that had written me off as an old, unnecessary thing. Helena's notebook lay on the desk in my office, silent proof of her betrayal. I didn't return it to my daughter when she called the next day to ask if I'd found her work notes. I lied, saying I hadn't seen any. I needed time to think about my next steps. 3 days later, Helena showed up on my doorstep again, this time with a large bag of groceries and a feigned smile. "How are you, Daddy? You look tired." She walked past me into the kitchen, where she immediately began organizing the groceries on the shelves as if it were her home. "I didn't sleep well," I answered, and it was the truth. I'd spent several nights thinking about the contents of the notebook and how my own daughter saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her inheritance. "That's another reason why you need to think about a change," Helena said carefully, closing the refrigerator. "At your age, insomnia can be a sign of more serious problems." "What kind of problems?" I asked, watching her reaction. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled with feigned concern. "You know, age-related changes, forgetfulness, confusion." She paused. "Daddy, I've noticed that you sometimes forget to turn off the stove, and last time the front door was unlocked when I came in. That was an outright fabrication. I've always been pedantic about security, especially since Eunice died." "I never forgot to turn off the stove, Helena," I objected firmly, "and I always lock the door." "Daddy, I saw it with my own eyes." She shook her head. "You just don't remember. And that's okay. But that's why we need to think about your safety." I realized what she was doing, trying to convince me that I'm losing my mind, that I can't take care of myself. Classic manipulation. "I'm tired," I sighed, deciding to change tactics. "I think I'll lie down for a while." Helena's face brightened. Sure, Dad. I'll finish up here for now and then I'll leave. I have some work calls to make. You rest. I slowly made my way up the stairs to my bedroom, but instead of lying down, I carefully closed the door and stood against the wall, listening. If Helena was going to make a work call, I wanted to know what the conversation would actually be about. The kitchen was quiet for a few minutes. She was probably finishing up the groceries. Then I heard her footsteps in the living room and a muffled voice. I tiptoed out of the bedroom and crept toward the stairs where I could hear better. Yes, Brandon, I'm at his place right now, Helena said, her voice louder and more confident than when she was talking to me. He's gone to bed. Looks worse every day, I tell you. Forgets to lock doors, turn off appliances. I think we need to speed things up. Pause. She listened to her husband's answer. No, he doesn't know yet. I'm slowly bringing him around to the idea. You know how it is with him. If you tell him right away, he gets stubborn. But I've already made arrangements with Sun Valley. They're expecting him in 10 days. Basic package, like we discussed. He doesn't need more than that. He's asleep most of the time anyway. Another pause. The house? The realtor said we can put it on the market as soon as Dad moves in. He thinks with a few minor cosmetic repairs, we could easily get the asking price, maybe even more. The neighborhood is booming right now. I gritted my teeth, feeling a wave of anger rising. 10 days. I only have 10 days left before Helena plans to send me to this boarding house. Derek? She continued. No, he doesn't know anything, and you don't have to tell him yet. You know how attached he is to his grandfather and this house. He'll protest, make a scene. We'll tell him when it's ready. We'll put him on the spot. She laughed. Yes, the poor man thinks he can have all those old books and junk he and his grandmother collected. But I've already arranged for an appraiser to come as soon as we move my father out. Most of it will be auctioned off. Some of it we'll just throw away. This junk will only drive the price of the house down. I gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles turned white. Junk. Junk. That's what Eunice and I were to her, our memories. Well, I've got to go, Helena said. I don't want him to wake up in here. Yes. Tomorrow I'll bring some papers to sign. A power of attorney to manage his finances and a consent to stay at the boarding house. Don't worry, I've thought of everything. I'll tell him they're just insurance papers. He won't even read them. She laughed again, and the sound made me shudder. I love you. See you tonight. I quietly walked back into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling my hands shake. Part of me still hoped I'd been wrong, that I'd misunderstood my daughter's intentions. But now I had irrefutable proof. My daughter was planning to send me to a cheap boarding house, trick me into signing papers that would take away my control over my own finances, sell Eunice and me the house, and get rid of all of our belongings, all behind my back, cloaked in fake concern. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how Eunice and I could have raised such a person. Where had we gone wrong? Had Helena always been like this, or had life made her callous and calculating? Half an hour later, I heard the front door slam. Helena had left, confident that her plan was working perfectly. I went downstairs and went to the window just in time to see her car pull into the driveway. Sighing heavily, I made my way into the study and sat down at the desk. On the wall hung a picture of Eunice, taken on our silver wedding day. She was smiling, and in her eyes was the same kindness I had seen on the first day we met. "What would you do, Eunice?" I asked aloud, looking at the picture, and I could almost hear her answer. "What's right, Lloyd? What we've always talked about." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a shabby business card from Pierce Edmonds, my old friend and lawyer, whom we hadn't spoken to in years. We'd met when I designed the office building that housed his firm and had kept in touch ever since. Pierce had helped Eunice and me draft our wills and always offered sound legal advice. I dialed the number on the business card, praying it hadn't changed over the years. "Edmonds and Associates Law Firm," a woman's voice answered. "Good afternoon," I said. "May I speak to Piers Edmonds, please? This is Lloyd Finnick. an old client of his. Just a moment, Mr. Finnick, to see if Mr. Edmonds is available. After a short pause, a familiar bass voice came through the phone. Lloyd? Lloyd Finnick? Gosh, it's been a long time. Hello, Pierce. I smiled involuntarily, hearing my old friend's enthusiasm. I hope I'm not distracting you from important business. I'll always have time for you, Pierce replied. How are you? How's Eunice? I swallowed a lump in my throat. Eunice died 5 weeks ago, Pierce. There was a long pause. God, Lloyd, I'm so sorry, he said at last. I didn't know. She was a wonderful woman. Yes, she was, I agreed quietly. What can I do for you, my friend? I need legal advice, Pierce, and fast. It's, family matter. It's pretty urgent. Of course, Pierce's tone turned professional. Can you come by the office tomorrow? I have a window at 10 in the morning. I'll be there at 10, I replied. Thank you, Pierce. Hanging up the phone, I leaned back in my chair, feeling my resolve growing inside. I'm not going to let Helena take my life as she sees fit, and I won't let her destroy what Eunice and I have been building all these years. I remembered a conversation I had with Eunice a few years before her illness. We were sitting in the garden watching the neighborhood children play with a kitten we had recently adopted for them. You know, Lloyd, Eunice said then, I often think about what will happen to our house when we're gone. Helena will have it, I answered. That's the way it usually goes. Eunice shook her head. I'm not sure that's right. Helena has never valued this house the way we do. To her, it's just an asset, an asset. What are you suggesting? I asked, surprised by her words. I think our house should serve a good cause, she said quietly. Maybe become an animal shelter or an outreach center, something to continue our work when we're gone. I had laughed at her idea then, thinking it impractical. But now, looking at Eunice's picture, I realized she was right. Our house deserved a better fate than being sold for profit. I pulled a folder of important documents out of the closet, the certificate of title to the house, insurance, bank statements. I'd need it all tomorrow for my conversation with Pierce. The next morning, I got up early so I could get cleaned up before the meeting. I picked out my best suit, the same one I wore at Eunice's last birthday party. She always said it made me look 10 years younger. At 9:30, I hailed a cab, deciding not to take any chances with public transportation. The driver, a young guy with dreadlocks, looked surprised at the downtown address I gave him. The law firm? He asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Trouble with the law, Grandpa? No, I smiled. More like trying to prevent them. Pierce's office was in a modern glass and concrete building. I couldn't help but admire the structure, remembering how I'd been involved in the design of such buildings in my prime years. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red hair, ushered me into Pierce's office. My old friend hadn't changed much over the years. He was still the same heavy-set man with a thick gray beard and shrewd blue eyes. Lloyd! He rose from the table and shook my hand firmly. It's good to see you, though I'm sorry to see you under these circumstances. We sat down, and Pierce offered me coffee, which I did not refuse. When the secretary came out, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully. So, what brings you to me? I pulled out Helena's notebook and placed it in front of him. My daughter plans to put me in a cheap nursing home and sell my house, without my consent. Pierce raised his eyebrows and opened the notebook. His face grew increasingly grim as he read. Lloyd, this is... He shook his head. This is outrageous. She has no right to dispose of your property without your consent. She's going to get that consent by trickery. I told him of the conversation I'd overheard. Tomorrow, she's bringing some papers for me to sign. Allegedly, insurance papers. Pierce frowned. If you sign a power of attorney to manage your finances, she can actually handle your estate, and if you sign the consent to boarding, it'll be hard to argue against it. I'm not going to sign anything, I said firmly, but I need to get ahead of her, protect my house and my money. What do you want to do? I took a deep breath. I want to donate the house to an animal charity. My wife and I have spent our lives rescuing homeless animals, and she's always said she'd like our house to continue to serve that purpose. And I also want to open an account in the name of my grandson Derek. He's the only one who truly cares about me. Pierce stroked his beard thoughtfully. It can be done, but you realize that your daughter will probably challenge it in court, don't you? She could claim that you're incapacitated or that you were pressured. I have a medical report from my doctor dated last week. I pulled a document out of a folder. Dr. Myers certifies that I am sane and fully competent. Pierce looked over the report and nodded. Good, that'll help. But we still need to act quickly and intelligently. He picked up a notebook and started making notes. I'll prepare a deed of gift to donate the house to a charitable foundation. Is there a specific foundation you'd like to work with? I shook my head. I don't know them personally, but I'd like it to be an organization that really helps animals, not just raises money. I know a couple reliable foundations, Pierce said. New Hope and Friends Forever. Both have great reputations. I can contact them and see if they'd be interested in obtaining real estate to build a shelter. Do that, please, I nodded. And about the account for Derek. That's easier, Pierce made another note. You can set up a trust fund in his name. I'll help with the paperwork. How much do you want to transfer? I said the amount and Pierce froze for a moment, then whistled respectfully. Impressive. You've prepared well for retirement, my friend. Eunice and I have always been frugal, I shrugged, and I've invested well in my time. Good. Pierce closed his notebook. Here's what we'll do. I'll contact the funds today. As soon as I hear back, I'll prepare all the necessary documents. Tomorrow you'll come here again and we'll sign everything. I'll also arrange for notarization and witnesses so your daughter can't challenge the documents on the grounds that you were under duress. Thank you, Pierce. I felt a heavy weight fall from my shoulders. I knew I could count on you. That's what friends are for, he shook my hand. And, Lloyd, I'm sorry you're going through this, especially after losing Eunice. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The thought of Eunice still hurt like a fresh wound. See you tomorrow, I finally said. As I drove back home, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I had a plan of action, a goal. I was no longer a helpless victim awaiting my fate. At home, I found a note from Helena slipped under the door. Dad, I'll stop by tomorrow at 2. There are important matters to discuss. Helena. Important matters. Documents I have to sign without reading. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Then I slowly walked around the house, touching familiar objects, remembering the stories associated with each one. This is where Eunice put her first orchid. In this chair, I read stories to little Helena. On this table, Derek assembled his first constructor. I knew I would soon have to say goodbye to this house, but now it was my decision, my choice, and the house would serve a purpose that Eunice had always considered important. That evening, Pierce called. Good news, Lloyd, he said. I've been in touch with New Hope, and they're very interested. Their director, Martha King, would like to meet with you tomorrow morning before signing the papers. It's a serious organization. They run 2 shelters in the state and have an excellent reputation. Sounds good, I replied. What time? 9 o'clock. I've already prepared all the paperwork, including the trust fund for Derek. Everything will be ready for you when you get here. Thanking Pierce, I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, looking at Eunice's picture. Tomorrow would be a crucial day, a day when I would change the course of the game my daughter was playing. You were right, Eunice, I whispered. Our house must serve a good cause. And it will. I returned from Pierce's in the morning with a sense of accomplishment. The meeting with Martha King, the director of New Hope, had gone even better than I had expected. This energetic woman in her 50s with short graying hair radiated genuine passion for her work. When I told her about my and Eunice's love of animals, how we had rescued homeless cats and dogs for years, she almost wept. "Mr. Finnick, your gift is exactly what we need," she said, shaking my hand. "We've wanted to open a third shelter for a long time, and your house and garden are perfect for it." We signed all the documents in the presence of a notary and 2 witnesses. Pierce was meticulous in his paperwork, so there were no legal loopholes. The house officially became the property of the New Hope Charitable Foundation, with the stipulation that it would be used as a shelter for homeless animals named after Eunice Finnick. At the same time, I set up a trust fund in Derek's name with a substantial sum of money that would provide him with financial independence and the opportunity to start his own business. Copies of the documents were in my briefcase when I got home. Pierce promised to deliver the originals to the appropriate authorities today. Tomorrow, he said, the change of ownership would appear in the official registers, and there was nothing Helena could do about it. "She'll be furious," Pierce warned me. "Be prepared for that." I was, more than he could have imagined. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just as promised, Helena rang the doorbell. This time she wasn't alone. Her husband, Brandon Bowen, a tall man with thinning blonde hair and the cocky smile of a realtor, used to convincing people to do what was right for him, was there with her. "Daddy," Helena hugged me with feigned warmth. "Do you remember Brandon?" "Of course." I shook hands with my son-in-law, whom I'd seen only once a year at family gatherings. "Come on in." They settled into the living room like visitors appraising real estate with attentive eyes noticing every detail. Brandon didn't even try to hide his interest as he stared at the ceilings and walls. "Nice construction," he said. "Houses like this are a big seller right now." I stayed silent, waiting for them to get to the point. Helena pulled a file out of her bag. "Dad, Brandon and I want to talk to you about your future," she began in what she probably thought was a caring tone. "Since Mom died, you're here alone in this big house. We're worried about you." "Really?" I raised my eyebrows. "Of course we do," Brandon said. "You're family, Lloyd, and we want you to be safe and get the care you need." "What kind of care do you mean?" I asked, pretending not to understand what they were getting at. Helena cast a quick glance at her husband, then opened the folder. "We found a wonderful place, Dad. The Sun Valley Boarding House. It has medical staff, organized meals, recreational programs for people your age." "Nursing home," I said bluntly. "A boarding house for the elderly," Helena corrected me. "It's a modern facility with a good reputation. You'll be much better off there than here, alone." "What about the house?" I decided to test how blatantly they were willing to lie. "Well," Brandon coughed, "the house will stay in the family, of course. We'll keep an eye on it while you're, vacationing at the boarding house." Helena quickly added, "We might even rent it out to cover the cost of your stay at Sun Valley." The lie was so obvious that I almost marveled at their audacity. They didn't even bother to come up with a plausible story. "And how much is this, boarding house?" I asked, continuing the game. "Don't worry about that," Helena smiled. "We've organized everything. Your pension should be enough to pay for the basic package." Basic package. The cheapest option, no doubt. What if I don't want to go to that pension? I decided to make it a little more difficult for them. What if I want to stay in my house? Helena's face tensed, but she quickly got over herself. "Dad, be reasonable. You can't stay here. It's not safe. You forget to turn off appliances. You leave doors unlocked." "I don't forget," I said firmly. "See?" Helena looked at Brandon. "He doesn't even remember." "Lloyd," Brandon interjected with the tone of a professional negotiator, "think about your comfort. At Sun Valley, you'll be taken care of. You won't be alone. And here," he circled the living room, "there are too many memories here. It's hard on you, especially with Eunice gone." The mention of my wife's name from his lips seemed almost sacrilegious, but I restrained myself. "I need to think about it," I said. It's a big decision. Of course, Papa, Helena smiled, but I could see impatience in her eyes. But, you see, we've already paid in advance. The place is waiting for you. If you refuse, we'll lose the money. How inconvenient, I remarked with an irony she didn't catch. Exactly, Helena picked up on it. That's why it would be better if you made your decision today. We could organize the move as early as tomorrow. Tomorrow. Of course. The sooner they get rid of me, the sooner they can sell the house. I've decided it's time to end this farce. Okay, I sighed, feigning defeat. If you think it's for the best. Helena and Brandon's faces brightened. They looked at each other with such triumph that it almost made me laugh. That's a great decision, Daddy, Helena exclaimed. You won't regret it. You'll love it there, I promise. Are there any papers I need to sign? I asked, looking at the folder in her hands. Yes, just a few formalities. Helena quickly pulled out the papers. It's a consent to stay at the boarding house and some other standard forms. She handed me a stack of papers and a pen. I slowly put on my glasses and began to read the first page, deliberately doing so very carefully. Dad, there's nothing special in there, Helena said impatiently. Just standard forms. I always read what I sign, I replied, turning the page. It's an engineer's habit. Helena threw an annoyed glance at Brandon. I continued to read slowly, enjoying their growing impatience. Finally, reaching the last page of the consent to posting, I signed. What's this? I asked, looking at the next document. Just a power of attorney, Helena said quickly, so that I can help you with paying bills and other financial matters while you're at the boarding house. I read the document carefully. It wasn't just a power of attorney, but a full transfer of authority to manage all my finances and property. By signing it, I would be effectively giving Helena control of my entire life. You know, I'm going to hold off on that for now, I said, setting the paper aside. I want to see how I'll be at the boarding house first. Helena's face stretched. But Daddy, it'll be more comfortable this way. You won't have to worry about bills and payments. I don't mind worrying about my money, I replied firmly, at least for now. Brandon put his hand on his wife's shoulder as if warning her not to push too hard. Of course, Lloyd, he said with a professional smile. You can sign it later when you're ready. The important thing is that you agreed to the move. It's the right thing to do. The next morning at 10 sharp, Helena and Brandon arrived with the small van they had rented for my move. They were alert and businesslike, as if they were doing a chore. Ready, Daddy? Helena asked as she entered the house. Oh, you're already packed. Great. She glanced at my 2 modest bags. Is that everything? Maybe you want to take something else? No, that's enough, I replied. Like you said, the boarding house has everything you need. Brandon took my bags and carried them to the van, while Helena waited impatiently at the door. We have to go, Dad. The boarding house is expecting your arrival by 11. I walked slowly around the first floor, saying goodbye to the house where I had spent so many happy years with Eunice. Helena glanced nervously at her watch, but didn't rush me. Apparently, she was afraid I might change my mind. Finally, I was ready. As I left the house, I turned around one last time and mentally said goodbye, not only to the house, but also to my old life. Things would be different from now on. The drive to Sunny Valley took about 40 minutes. The boarding house turned out to be a gray 3-story building on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by an unassuming garden with a few benches. There was nothing sunny about it. Rather, the place looked dull and impersonal. In the lobby, we were met by the receptionist, a full middle-aged woman with a strained smile. She went through the standard check-in procedure, asking questions more to Helena than to me, as if I were incapacitated. Room 205, second floor, she said, handing me the key. The basic package includes 3 meals a day in the common dining room, weekly housekeeping, and a medical checkup once a month. Additional services are charged separately. My room was small, with minimal furniture, a bed, a nightstand, a closet, a desk, and a chair. The window overlooked the parking lot, which was probably the only plus I could see who was coming and going. Helena set my bags on the floor and looked around with feigned interest. "It's cozy, isn't it? And everything you need is close by." "Very cozy," I replied dryly. "A real suite." She didn't catch the irony. "Here's the schedule of meals and activities." She put the booklet on the table. "I'll stop by in a few days to see how you're settling in." "Take your time," I said. "You must have a lot on your plate." "Yes, indeed," she faltered. "I have a lot of work in the next few days. The work of moving her things into my house, no doubt." "Do you have the keys to the house?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Yes." I pulled a bunch of keys out of my pocket and handed them to her. "Here, keep an eye on the house while I rest here." Helena grabbed the keys with poorly concealed impatience. "Of course, Daddy. Don't worry about a thing. Have a good time, meet new people. You'll like it here, you'll see." She gave me a quick, formal kiss on the cheek and headed for the door. "Bye, Dad. See you in a few days." When the door closed behind her, I went to the window and waited. A few minutes later, Helena exited the building and walked briskly towards the parking lot where Brandon was waiting. I watched as she got into the car, showed her husband the keys, and smiled, triumphant, victorious. The car started, and they drove off, probably straight to my house to begin their plans. In the evening, there was a knock on the door. Derek stood on the doorstep with a worried look on his face and a bag that smelled of food. "Grandpa!" He hugged me. "I couldn't believe it when I heard Mom had sent you here." I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. "It's okay, Derek," I invited him in. "I knew this would happen." "You did?" He looked at me in surprise. "Sit down." I pointed to the only chair and sat down on the bed. "I have something you need to know." I took copies of the documents out of my briefcase and handed them to my grandson. "What are these?" he asked, beginning to read. As he read, his eyes widened more and more. He looked from the papers to me and back again, not believing what he was seeing. "Grandfather, you donated the house to a charity and set up a trust fund in my name." His voice was shaking. "When did you have time to do that?" "Yesterday," I answered, "right before your mother brought in her insurance papers." "But how did you know what she was planning?" I told him about the notebook I'd found, the conversation I'd overheard, my visit to Pierce. "I couldn't let her sell the house your grandmother and I had so lovingly built, and I knew Eunice would want the house to serve a good cause." Derek sat stunned, still holding the papers in his hands. "She'll be furious," he said at last. "She will," I nodded, "especially when she finds out that the house will now be an animal shelter." My grandson laughed suddenly. "An animal shelter? Mom hates animals. She always got mad when Grandma brought home another kitten." "Exactly," I smiled. "I think it's a fair irony." "And the trust fund?" Derek pointed to the second stack of documents. "Why did you do that, grandfather?" "Because you're the only one who's really cared about me since Eunice died," I answered simply. "And because I want you to be able to live your own life, not the one your mother has planned for you." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Just use that money wisely. Start your own business, travel, study, do what will make you happy." The week at Sun Valley dragged agonizingly slow. The daily routine was dull and monotonous. Breakfast at 7 in the morning, lunch at 12, dinner at 6 in the evening. Between meals there were endless hours of idleness, only occasionally interrupted by group activities, which the administration proudly called active leisure. Mostly it was board games or watching old movies on a shabby TV in the common room. I got to know a few of the neighbors. Albert Trotter, the chess player, turned out to be a former math teacher. His story was a sadly familiar one. His son had decided that his elderly father would be better off in a boarding house, and he and his family had moved into his parents' home. Harold Payne, his regular chess partner, used to be an accountant. There was also Edith Lamb, a quiet woman in her 70s who knitted all day and rarely spoke to anyone except the nurse who brought her medicine. Helena, as promised, took her time visiting me. She called only once on the third day to ask if I needed anything. Her voice sounded distracted with a noise in the background that sounded like renovations. "It's okay," I replied. "How are things at home?" "Oh, just great," she sounded excited. "Brandon and I are working on some improvements. You know, the house needed some updating." "That's right," I said calmly. "What kind of improvements?" "Nothing much, Dad. Just making it more modern. Taking out that old wallpaper in the living room, the floral wallpaper that Mom loved so much. And we're repainting the walls in neutral colors. It'll make the house look brand new." I felt a pang of pain thinking about how Eunice had chosen that wallpaper herself, how happy she was when we put it up. But that pain was quickly replaced by satisfaction at the thought that very soon Helena would realize that all her improvements had been for nothing. "That sounds interesting," I said. "Yes, and we decided to get rid of some of the old stuff," Helena continued. "The furniture that you and Mom have collected over the years. It's taking up too much space and, frankly, it looks outdated." "I understand." My voice remained calm, though I was seething inside. "What about the cat room?" Helena snorted. "The first thing we remodeled, that room was always a no-brainer. Now it's going to be my home office. Already ordered new furniture." "You've always dreamed of a home office," I remarked. "Yes, and I'm finally going to have one. Dad, I have to go. The workers are waiting for instructions. I'll call you next week, okay?" "Sure, honey. Take your time." Derek visited me almost every day, bringing home-cooked meals and news from the outside world. I learned from him that Helena wasn't just making improvements. She had moved in completely and was in the process of radically remodeling the house. "They threw out almost all the furniture from the living room and dining room," Derek told me during one of his visits. "They brought in some modern, minimalist stuff. Mom says it'll sell better if they decide to sell." "If they do?" I raised my eyebrows. "Well, she's pretending for now that they're just moving in to keep an eye on the house. But I've heard her and my father discussing that in 6 months to a year, when you get used to the boarding house, they could sell the house quietly." I shook my head. "What about my books? The photo albums?" Derek frowned. "They put the books in boxes and took them to the garage. They said they'd give them to the library or sell them to booksellers." "And the photo albums?" He hesitated. "I haven't seen them. But Mom had said something about clearing out the closets of old junk." I clenched my fists. The pictures of Eunice and I's life, our memories. To Helena, it was just junk. "Grandpa, when are we going to put the plan in motion?" Derek asked. They had already fully settled into the house. Mom has even started inviting her friends over for dinners, bragging about the new house. "Soon," I answered. "I want them to be fully convinced of their victory, so that the blow will be stronger later." On my 6th day at the boarding house, I called Pierce. "How's it going, Lloyd?" he asked. "You holding up?" "Hardly," I answered honestly. "This place, not for me. But I'm willing to endure it for the sake of our plan's finale. How's New Hope?" Martha King called yesterday. "They've finalized all the arrangements. They bought equipment, cages, feed. They've already got a few animals they're planning to move to the new shelter. They're ready to start when you give the signal." "Great," I said quietly. "Pierce, my daughter has already thrown out half of Eunice and I's stuff, remodeled the house. She didn't even wait for me to get used to the idea of a boarding house." "I'm not surprised," Pierce sighed. "People like that rarely have patience when it comes to money." "I think it's time," I said firmly. "Have Martha get ready for Friday. That'll be exactly 1 week since I moved here." "Are you sure?" Pierce asked. "Are you ready for a confrontation with your daughter?" "More than ready," I replied firmly. The longer I've been here, the more I realize that she never planned on treating me like a father. To her, I was always just an obstacle to her inheritance. After talking to Pierce, I called Martha King and informed her of the surgery date. She was energetic and enthusiastic. "We'll be ready, Mr. Finnick," she assured me. "Our volunteers will arrive early in the morning, around 8 o'clock. We'll have 3 vans with equipment and animals. I will personally supervise the process and have all the necessary paperwork with me." "Thank you, Martha," I said. I'd like to be there, not to show up right away, but to see everything with my own eyes." "Of course," she agreed. "That's your right. We'll be waiting for you." Finally, it was Friday afternoon. Derek came to pick me up early in the morning, around 7:30. He looked both excited and nervous. "Are you sure you want to see this, Grandpa?" he asked as we got into his car. "Mom's going to be furious. She might say some nasty things." "I have to see it, Derek," I said firmly, "and hear it. It will be, the closing of a certain chapter in my life." We parked on a nearby street where my house was clearly visible. Or rather, it wasn't my house anymore. It was New Hope's. It was 15 minutes past 9, and so far, everything seemed quiet and peaceful. The lights were on in the windows. Helena was probably already up and doing her morning chores, unaware of the change that was coming. At 8:05, 3 white vans with the New Hope logo, silhouettes of a cat and a dog in a circle, appeared on the street. The van slowly pulled up to the house and stopped in front of it. Martha King stepped out of the first car, dressed in a practical business suit. She was holding a file folder. "Here we go," Derek whispered. People in T-shirts with the foundation's logo on them, young guys and girls, obviously volunteers, started coming out of the vans. They opened the back doors of the vans and started unloading equipment, cages of different sizes, bags of food, trays, bowls, toys for animals. "Look," Derek pointed to the door of the house. Mom noticed. Indeed, the front door swung open and Helena appeared on the threshold. She was in a silk robe and had a cup of coffee in her hand. Her face was bewildered and annoyed. "Hey!" she shouted. "What are you doing? This is private property." Martha King calmly approached her, extending her hand in greeting. "Good morning. You must be Helena Bowen? I'm Martha King, director of the New Hope charity." "What's New Hope?" Helena didn't shake my hand. "What are you doing at my house?" "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Martha opened the folder. "It's not your house anymore. It's the property of our foundation. Here are the transfer documents. Duly registered." Helena snatched the papers and began to look through them frantically. Her face gradually changed from bewilderment to shock, then to rage. "What is this nonsense?" she almost shouted. "It's a forgery. My father couldn't have done this." "I assure you the documents are genuine," Martha replied calmly. "Mr. Finnick had officially donated the house to our foundation for the establishment of the Eunice Finnick Animal Shelter. The transfer was executed and registered the day before he moved into the boarding house. At this point, volunteers began carrying cages of animals out of the second van. Several cats, a couple of medium-sized dogs. The animals looked around curiously, some meowing and barking. Helena's face contorted with horror. "Animals? You brought animals into my house?" "Our home," Martha corrected. "And yes, it would be a shelter for stray animals, as Mr. Finnick had wished in memory of his late wife." Brandon, attracted by the noise, stepped to the doorstep. He was in a T-shirt and jeans, his hair disheveled. "What's going on?" he asked. Helena turned to him, waving papers at him. "Some kind of scam. These people are claiming that Dad gave the house to some dog shelter." Brandon snatched up the papers and began to study them. As a realtor, he had a better understanding of what he saw in front of him. His face gradually paled. "Helena, these look like real documents. It has your father's signature, notarized, and the seal of the registry office." "It can't be." Helena ripped the papers back. He couldn't have done this. We planned the whole thing. The last sentence was loud enough for everyone to hear. The volunteers exchanged glances and Martha wrinkled her nose slightly. "Mrs. Bowen," she said firmly but politely, "I also have an eviction notice. You must vacate the premises within 24 hours. We realize this is unexpected, so we're giving you time to gather your personal belongings." "Eviction?" Helena gasped with indignation. "You can't evict me from my own home." "Legally, it's possible," Brandon interjected, still studying the paperwork. "If the house really belongs to the foundation—" "Shut up!" Helena shouted at her husband. "This is some kind of mistake, or a scam. My father is incompetent. He didn't know what he was signing." "Mr. Finnick was declared fully competent by a doctor a week before he signed the papers," Martha replied calmly. "The medical report is attached to the documents." While they talked, the volunteers continued to unload the vans. Dozens of cages, bags of food, bowls, trays, and toys for the animals were now on the front lawn. Several cats had already been taken out of their carriers and were sitting in special enclosures. Suddenly Helena froze, looking somewhere over Martha's shoulder. Her eyes widened and she pointed her finger in our direction. "There he is!" she shouted. "Father, I know you're behind this. I hadn't planned on showing up this early, but apparently Derek and I didn't hide well enough." Helena rushed across the lawn to our car, shoving volunteers and jumping over boxes. Her silk robe waved like a flag. "Grandpa?" Derek looked at me questioningly. "It's time." I nodded and got out of the car. Helena ran up to me, her face contorted with rage. "You!" She was almost choking with anger. "You planned this whole thing. You deliberately made me believe that you were giving up, that you were moving to a boarding house." "Yes," I answered calmly. "Just like you planned to send me to a cheap nursing home and sell my house to Eunice and me." "You've been eavesdropping on my conversations?" Her eyes narrowed. "I found your notebook," I said, "with notes about the boarding house, the appraisal of the house, the realtor's commission. And then, yes, I overheard you talking to Brandon saying I was a liability and planning to trick me into signing the power of attorney." Helena froze for a moment, then tried to pull herself together. "Dad, you don't understand. I did it for your own good. You need care, supervision. Since Mom died, you've been different. Don't lie, Helena." I shook my head. "Not now, not after everything. You wanted the house and the money, nothing more." "Did you?" She went on the offensive. "What did you do? Gave the family home to some stray animals. That's insane. Legally insane. I'll challenge it in court." "Good luck," I said calmly. "The paperwork is impeccable. Pierce took care of it." "Pierce?" Helena frowned. "Your old lawyer friend? That's who's behind this." "No, Helena," I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm behind this. Me who has watched my daughter turn into a cold, calculating woman, ready to throw her father away like a piece of junk." "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "I'll prove that you were incapacitated, that you were pressured. I'll get the house back." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But while the court is hearing the case, which will take months, if not years, the house will be an orphanage, with all the consequences, the animals, the noise, the odors. By the time you prove anything, if you prove anything at all, the house won't be what you wanted it to be." Helena's face contorted with rage. You're a monster. You've always been like this, cold, calculating. Mom was the only one who made you human." "You're right about that," I said quietly. "Eunice did make me a better person. It's a shame she didn't have that effect on you." "Grandfather," Derek, who had been silently watching our conversation, put his hand on my shoulder. "Maybe we should leave. It's getting tense." Helena turned to her son, only now seeming to notice his presence. "What about you?" Her voice trembled. "Did you know about this? Did you help him?" "I found out afterward," Derek answered honestly, "when Grandfather was in the boarding house. And you didn't tell me. Helena looked at her son with disbelief. You let me move in here, start renovations, throw out the old furniture, knowing it wasn't ours anymore? You didn't ask my opinion when you sent Grandpa to the boarding house, Derek said quietly. You rarely ask my opinion at all. Helena took a step back, looking at both of us with hatred. It's fine, just fine. My own son and father united against me. A wonderful family. Helena, I tried to calm the situation. The house was always meant to serve a good cause. Eunice wanted it to. She loved animals, you know that. And a house built with that kind of love shouldn't have been just a commodity to sell. Don't you dare talk about Mom, Helena screamed. You have no right to use her name to justify your betrayal. Betrayal? I raised my eyebrows. Interesting choice of word from a man who called his father a burden and planned to get rid of him at the first opportunity. Brandon, who had been standing off to the side until then, walked over to Helena and put a hand on her shoulder. Honey, I think we should go back to the house and pack up our things. Legally, we can't stay here. Traitor! She pushed his hand away. Are you against me too? I'm on your side, Brandon said tiredly. But I'm also a realtor and I know these documents are real. We can sue, but for now, we have to comply. Helena shifted her gaze from her husband to her father, then to her son, then to Martha King and the volunteers who continued to unload the vans, trying to ignore the family drama. You're all going to regret this, she hissed. Especially you, she pointed at me. You think your life at the boarding house was bad? This is just the beginning. I'll make the rest of your days a living hell. With those words, she turned and walked briskly toward the house, where Brandon was already waiting for her at the door. Grandpa? Derek looked at me worriedly. Are you okay? Yeah. I took a deep breath. I knew this was going to be hard, but it was necessary. Martha King walked over to us, watching as Helena and Brandon disappeared into the house. Mr. Finnick, I'm so sorry about this, she said with genuine sympathy. Family conflicts are always painful. Don't apologize, Martha, I smiled weakly. You're doing a good thing. And the family problems, they were there long before you showed up. We stood next to Derek's car watching the volunteers continue to set up the future shelter. Several cats were already exploring the special enclosures set up on the lawn. The dogs were curiously sniffing around the new place. Everything that was happening had a strange symbolism, a new life, a new beginning for a house that had witnessed so many events. What now, grandfather? Derek asked. Where do you want to go? Back to the boarding house first, I decided. I need to get my things, and then we'll see. I think it's time to start a new chapter of my life, without the weight of the past. I cast one last look at the house where I spent so many years with Eunice, where there were happy times and bitter moments. Now, it would serve a new purpose, to give shelter to those in need. Eunice would love that. Let's go, I said to Derek. Our presence was no longer required here. Helena didn't come out to say goodbye again, and I was glad of that. Some ruptures are best left final with no attempt to soften the inevitable. As we drove away, I watched in the rearview mirror as the volunteers brought the first animal cages into the house, and I felt a strange satisfaction. The Finnick house would once again be full of life, albeit not human life. It was the right fate for a place built with such love. 6 months flew by. My new life was so different from my previous one that sometimes I could hardly believe the changes that had taken place. After the dramatic events of that Friday morning when Helena learned the truth about the house, I spent only 3 more days in Sun Valley. During that time, Derek, Pierce, and I found me a new place to stay, a spacious apartment at the Golden Years, a different kind of place from the one my daughter had sent me to. Golden Years was located in a picturesque place on the outskirts of Cincinnati, surrounded by a well-maintained park with a pond. Unlike the dreary Sun Valley, everything here was created for a comfortable life for the elderly. I had a spacious apartment with its own kitchen and a balcony overlooking the park. In the boarding house there were various circles and sections, a library, a small cinema hall, and even a swimming pool with warm water. It cost more, of course, but thanks to my investment I could afford such a life without any financial strain. That Saturday morning when I first walked into my new apartment, Derek was there to help with a few things. "Grandpa, this place is amazing," he exclaimed as he looked around the bright living room with its panoramic windows. "It's a lot different than that doghouse in Sun Valley." "Yes," I agreed, running my hand over the smooth surface of the bar that separated the kitchen from the living room. This was a place to live in, not just live out. "And no Helena and her care," Derek said, not hiding his relief. We hadn't spoken to Helena since that day. She tried to contact me a few times in the first week. She called Sun Valley, but I refused to answer the phone. When I moved, she apparently lost track of me for a while. Pierce said she hired a lawyer and began the process of contesting the gift of the house, claiming I was incapacitated or pressured. But all the paperwork was immaculate, with a medical report that I was legally competent and testimony from a notary and 2 independent witnesses that I acted voluntarily and knowingly. Derek visited me almost every day for the first few weeks, helping me settle into my new place. With funds from a trust fund I had set up for him, he quit his old job and started his own computer security company. His enthusiasm and energy reminded me of myself as a young man just starting out as an engineer. "You know, Grandpa," he once said as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, "I never thought I'd own my own business when I was 24. I always thought I'd spend years working for someone else, gaining experience." "You'll still be gaining experience," I said. "It's just that you're your own boss now. And it's all thanks to you." He looked at me gratefully. "Not just because of the money, although it helped a lot. You showed me that it's possible to resist circumstances, not to give up even when everything seems to be against you." I smiled, touched by his words. At that moment I realized that despite all the conflicts with Helena, I still had a real family, my grandson who had inherited Eunice's best traits. One day, about 2 months after I moved in, Derek suggested we go to our former home to see how the orphanage was set up. "Would you be up for that?" he asked cautiously. Would it be too hard? I wondered. Sure, the house held many memories, both happy and bitter. But my decision to turn it over to the animal shelter had been a deliberate one, and I wanted to see it realized. "I think I'm ready," I replied. "Call Martha and see if we can come over." Martha King was glad to see us. When we pulled up to the house the next day, I didn't immediately recognize it. There was a new sign in front of the building, Eunice Finnick Homeless Animal Shelter. The house itself had been repainted in light colors, and along the path to the entrance were the same roses Eunice had once planted. "Mr. Finnick," Martha came out to greet us, smiling warmly. "How nice to see you. How are you feeling?" "Fine, Martha, thank you," I shook her hand. "I see you've made a lot of changes around here." "Yes, we tried to make this place cozy for both animals and visitors." She proudly circled the area. "Come in. I'll show you what we've created." Inside, the house had changed too, but not as drastically as I had feared. The living room had been transformed into a spacious room with lots of soft beds and play structures for the cats. A few of the furry residents came right over to us, sniffing curiously at the new visitors. "Now we have 23 cats and 14 dogs," Martha told us as she led us around the house. "In 2 months we have already found new homes for 30 animals. People come to meet the pets and often leave empty-handed. We went up to the second floor, where there used to be bedrooms. Now there were rooms for different groups of animals, separately for kittens, for elderly cats, for those who needed special care. The former cat room, which Helena wanted to turn into a home office, was now home to several old cats, snoozing peacefully on soft cushions. "These are our old-timers," Martha said fondly. "They're 12 or 15 years old and they're the hardest to place. but we haven't given up hope. One of the cats, a gray one with white paws and chest, opened his eyes and looked at me carefully. Then, to Martha's surprise, he stood up, stretched, and walked leisurely toward me. "Wow," she marveled. "That's Oscar, our most unsociable guest. He usually avoids visitors." Oscar rubbed against my leg and meowed softly. I leaned over and gently stroked him. The cat closed his eyes in pleasure and began to purr. "I think you two have found each other," Derek smiled. I left the shelter that day with a deep sense of satisfaction. Seeing the home that Eunice and I had built and loved now serve a noble purpose by rescuing abandoned animals felt right. It was exactly what Eunice would have wanted. A week later, I returned to the shelter and picked up Oscar. Martha was surprised but pleased. "Usually older people don't want to take in older animals," she said. "They're afraid they won't outlive them and the pets will be alone again." "Oscar and I are the same age, humanly speaking," I smiled. "I think we'll get along well, the two old men. And indeed, Oscar has become a wonderful companion. Calm, unobtrusive, but always ready to keep me company when I was reading or watching TV. The golden years allowed pets, and Oscar quickly became a favorite of the staff and other guests. 4 months after I moved in, the news came from Pierce. The court had dismissed Helena's lawsuit challenging the gift. "The judge was unequivocal," Pierce told me over the phone. "All the documents are in order. The evidence is compelling. Your daughter could not provide any evidence of your incapacity or coercion." "How did she feel about the decision?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Not very well," Pierce replied evasively. "Her lawyer says she plans to appeal, but frankly, it's a long shot." I sighed. Helena's stubbornness knew no bounds. She was willing to spend any amount of money and time to prove her case, or rather, to get what she thought was rightfully hers. 2 weeks after that conversation, Derek told me the news. Helena had lost her job. She'd been spending too much time litigating, he explained, missing important meetings, missing deadlines. And when her boss reprimanded her, she made a scene. She ended up getting fired. "How's Brandon doing?" I asked. Derek gloomed. "He and his mom, they're having problems. After the whole house thing, they're fighting all the time. Dad thinks Mom is too hung up on revenge and she accuses him of not being supportive enough." I shook my head. I can't say I was surprised. A marriage built on material values rarely survives serious financial upheaval. About a month later, as I was returning from a morning walk in the park, the receptionist at Golden Years informed me that I had a visitor waiting. "A woman," he said. "Quite persistent. Says she's your daughter." I froze. This was the moment I'd expected and feared at the same time. Part of me wanted to just walk away from the meeting, avoid another confrontation. But the other part of me realized that sooner or later this conversation had to happen. "Okay," I nodded. "Tell her I'll be there in 5 minutes." When I got up to my apartment, I checked on Oscar first. The cat was sleeping on his favorite pillow by the window, warming his old bones in the morning sunlight. Then I changed my shirt, slightly wet with sweat from the walk, and went down to the common living room, where the receptionist said Helena was waiting. She was sitting in a chair by the fireplace, tapping her foot nervously on the floor. She had changed considerably over the months, losing weight, dark circles under her eyes, and her hair, always perfectly styled, was showing the gray that she had carefully painted over before. "Daddy." She stood up when she saw me. There was a strange mixture of relief and annoyance in her voice. "I finally found you." "Hello, Helena." I sat down in the chair across from her. "You look good." It was a polite lie, but I didn't want to start the conversation with a confrontation. "Don't," she waved her hand. "I look terrible and we both know it. The last few months have been difficult." "Derek told me you lost your job," I said. "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" She grinned bitterly. "You're the reason this all happened." Because of your crazy decision to give the house to some stray animals instead of leaving it to your family. I'm not going to argue with you, Helena, I replied calmly. You know my position. I know yours. Why did you come? She swallowed and straightened up, as if gathering her strength. I need help, Dad. Financial help. I've been out of work for 2 months. My bills are mounting. The mortgage on my apartment. What about Brandon? I interrupted. Isn't he working? Helena looked away. We broke up. Temporarily. He thinks I'm too obsessed with the lawsuit against you. Said he'd come back when I'd come to my senses. I sighed. It was even worse than Derek had told me. And you came to me for money? After everything that had happened? You're my father, she said, a pleading tone in her voice. No matter what. And I know you have the means. This apartment must be worth 3 times the price of Sun Valley. 5 times, actually, I corrected. But this isn't about cost, Helena. It's about what you did to me. You called me a burden. You planned to throw me out of my life, to take away the house that your mother and I built with so much love. I just wanted to take care of you, she exclaimed. Yes, maybe not in the best way, but I had good intentions. Good intentions? I shook my head. Helena, I heard your conversation with Brandon. I saw your notes in your notebook. You were planning to sell the house, throw out my and Eunice's things, send me to the cheapest boarding house. That's not caring. That's greed. She lowered her head, and for a moment I thought I saw tears in her eyes. But when she looked up at me again, her gaze was hard. Okay. I admit I did wrong. I apologize. Is that enough? Will you help me? I looked at my daughter carefully, trying to see something of the little girl Eunice and I loved so much, but in front of me sat a grown woman, hardened by life and her own ambition, ready to feign remorse for the sake of money. No, Helena, I said at last. I won't help you. Not because I can't or won't forgive you. It's because your apology is insincere. You're not sorry for what you did. You're only sorry that your plan didn't work. You're just getting back at me. Her face contorted with anger, enjoying my problems. No, daughter, I shook my head. I'm not enjoying it. I'm sad to see what you've become. But I will not condone your behavior. You're an adult, Helena. Get a job. Make peace with your husband. Start over. Without my money. You'll regret this, she hissed, standing up. I'll win the appeal. I'll prove you were incapacitated when you signed that stupid deed of gift, and then you'll know what it's like to be without everything. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said quietly. But I've already lost everything that was precious to me. Your mother. After that, material losses aren't so bad. Helena looked at me with undisguised hatred. Goodbye, Daddy. I hope you're happy with your life here, with your new friends and stray cats. She turned abruptly and walked briskly toward the exit. I didn't bother to stop her. Some relationships can't be repaired no matter how painful it is. When I returned to my apartment, I found Oscar still asleep by the window. The sunbeam had shifted, but the cat had moved with it, not wanting to lose the precious warmth. I sat down beside him and stroked him softly until he woke up and rumbled with pleasure. Here we are, old boy. Just the 2 of us again, I told him. Just as it should be. That evening I sat in my favorite chair, leafing through the photo album that had miraculously escaped Helena's clearing out. Oscar nestled in my lap, occasionally lifting his head to look at what his master was so interested in. In one of the pictures, Eunice was holding the little black kitten we had found in the park in the rain. Her face glowed with such tenderness and care that even after all these years, my heart clenched with love for her. See, Oscar, I showed the picture to the cat. This was your great-grandmother, you might say. She loved people like you, gave home and care to dozens of furry strays. And now our home continues her work. Oscar purred softly as if understanding. I closed the album and looked out the window at the sunset sky, colored in pinks and golds. Life was a strange thing. Sometimes it took away the most precious things. Sometimes it gave unexpected twists and turns. 6 months ago, I was a lost widower who'd been sent to a cheap boarding house by my own daughter. Today, I sat in a cozy apartment with a cat on my lap and a grandson who visited me almost every day. Perhaps justice existed. Not the instant, dramatic justice they write about in books, but a slow, almost imperceptible justice that works through the small decisions we make every day. Decisions that ultimately determine who we are and what kind of life we live. I petted Oscar, who was already starting to doze off. "You know, old boy," I said quietly, "I think Eunice would be pleased. The house we built with so much love is now serving a good cause. And you and I are settling in quite nicely, aren't we?" The cat blinked sleepily, as if in agreement, and closed his eyes again. Outside the window, the last rays of the sun were disappearing over the horizon, giving way to evening twilight. Another day was coming to an end, but there were many more days ahead, full of peace and quiet joy. And this was exactly the life I wanted to live in my last years.